Hi, welcome back to our Road to Steam series, a series in which we'll be creating a game from scratch. Previously on our HEUSS Dev Diaries, we made big changes to the game. In today's episode, we're implementing hit effects to our combat animations. Interested to follow the progress of our game? Make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell to get all the latest development updates every week. After multiple delays, we're finally ready to add hit effects to our combat experience. Today's video will be an introduction to a multi-part video series on special effects. These devlogs will focus on various visual feedbacks that happen when enemies get hit. This will include blood and dust effects, in addition to the hit effects we have planned for today. So without further ado, let's dive right into it. Hit effects are used in a majority of games to elevate the action happening on screen. Their purpose is to both give critical visual feedback to players during gameplay, and to amplify the impact of game interactions. However, your criteria for implementing hit effects will drastically change depending on which type of game you're making. To exemplify this, let's take a look at how different game genres tackle this problem. In fighting games, hit effects will often last longer than usual. It allows players more time to react when chaining combos together, which in turn helps them in their timing and execution of said combos. But these long-lasting hit effects only work because of the fact that characters get frozen in place after getting hit. This little detail may seem superfluous at first, but it is crucial to keep the visual integrity of these effects. When this hit stun mechanic is missing, the presentation quickly falls apart and you get hit effects that do not belong with the action happening on screen. This usually happens because these effects don't have enough time to dissipate before getting separated from the ragdolls acting out the impacts. However, not every game has the luxury to freeze their characters in place. Some types of gameplay simply do not allow for this mechanic to be present. So, how do these types of games deal with this problem? Usually, the answer is simply to reduce the duration of their hit effects. By cutting down on their lifetime, games like the Diablo series can keep the visual integrity of their effects while still delivering a great sense of impact with their ragdolls. So to avoid these tricky visual trappings, we'll outline some guidelines to ensure that our special effects fit within the style of our game. When it comes to HEUSS, we have three design pillars from which we create hit effects. First, like we explained a moment ago, our game falls in the group that requires snappy and brief hit effects. The reasons for this are twofold. One is because we cannot freeze our characters after a hit, as it would interfere with the fast rhythm of our combat. Two is because of the nature of our ragdolls. As you might have noticed in our gameplay, we have a tendency to make our ragdolls fly at high velocities. These extreme speeds give a great sense of impact to our combat interactions, but it also comes with a cost. The downside of this is that our hit effects do not have a lot of time to dissipate before getting separated from their ragdolls. This forces us to limit their duration to a smaller time window than usual. For our second design pillar, we're aiming for hit effects that are striking, but simple in their presentation. The reason for this is because our art style is already simple in its own right, so to create overly complex effects would only serve to clash with the current presentation of our game world. Finally, our last pillar consists of having hit effects that mainly dissipate outward, instead of inward. This means that throughout our effect's lifetime, we'll need their middle portion to remain as noise-free as possible. Our goal with this is to reserve this specific space for the blood effects we'll implement in the next episode. By keeping this middle region cleared out, it will allow the blood to be seen through the hit effects. With these principles in mind, it's now time to get our hands dirty. At the moment, we divide all our hit effects into two categories. Those that come from a player interaction, and those that come from an enemy interaction. To know which one is which during combat, we defined a specific overarching color for each category. In total, we designed 5 hit effects for today's episode. 3 for the player, and 2 for the enemies. The first one in our player category is a basic hit. This effect is used when the main character deflects arrows, when arrows collide with each other, and when the player strikes enemies without killing them. Our second one is a kill effect. It's used in situations where the main character kills an enemy without dismembering them. This works for melee strikes, as well as evaded arrows. For the final effect in this category, we created a slash to mimic the feeling of a sword passing through enemies. This one gets instantiated every time an enemy gets dismembered. All these special effects are characterized by light colors so that it can blend well with the sword slash effect we created in our 29th episode. When it comes to our second category, we kept the foundation of the hit effects we just presented, but tweaked some of the visual properties. Our first one is a shield hit. It gets spawned in two specific situations. When a shield bearer deflects an evaded arrow, and when a player attack gets blocked by a shield. For our final special effect, we modified our previous kill effect to create a critical hit. This one is used when the player gets hit by an enemy, or when an enemy gets killed by a friendly arrow. These two hit effects are characterized by a darker presentation to contrast those from the player category. Now that all of our hit effects are out in the spotlight, let's take a look at one in particular to understand how it's made. We'll go with the kill effect found in the player category. This visual effect is divided into 6 components. First, we have the glow. The glow is a simple transparent circle combined with a multiply shader. This shader makes everything behind the glow brighter by multiplying their color value. Our second component are light rays. These are transparent sprites that get instantiated in groups of 8 to 11. They basically serve the same purpose as our glow, which is why they also use a multiply shader to brighten everything behind them. However, they are shaped in a way to appear more scattered to support the look of an explosion. Our third component are impact lines. Like the light rays we just presented, these are simple sprites of white lines that get instantiated to give the illusion of impact. They aren't transparent, and don't have any special shader. For our fourth component, we have a simple shockwave. It's made of a ring-shaped sprite that gets bigger over its lifetime. We use it to really emphasize the impact part of the effect. The fifth component are residual particles that linger after the main effect is done. We instantiate these particles to give a more complete overall look to the asset. Finally, for our sixth component, we have animated sprites. This effect is made of a sprite sheet. A sprite sheet is a group of sprites that are orderly placed on a single image. To get it to animate, we equally divide it in our particle system, and cycle between each section of the image to animate it. But to achieve this striking look, we first had to modify an existing sprite sheet we took from another visual asset. We began the process by desaturating the original sprites inside Krita to transform them into a grayscale image. When this was done, we overlaid the gray tones with a cyan tint to make the sprites fit the color of our sword slash effect. Then as a final touch, we darkened the edges of the drawing to achieve the striking look in question. The combined result of all these modifications culminate into a hit effect that has tremendous impact once everything is moving together. But to truly appreciate its beauty, one must witness it in the midst of combat, where it can freely shine alongside its brethren. Stay tuned for our next episode where we'll create a blood effect that splatters on the ground. Make sure to like, comment and subscribe, and we'll see you next week for the new episode of our Road to Steam series.